All right, welcome to this week's Synergy Coaching and Wellness podcast. This week's podcast is going to be about heart rate variability. We're going to have a discussion about what HRV is. We're going to discuss the variability, where it comes from. We're going to talk about the impact of HRV or what it signifies in terms of our autonomic nervous system. We're going to dive into what does the HRV number mean to you, whether you're an athlete or whether you're somebody that's just tracking this data to kind of gain some understanding about where you exist on it within your autonomic nervous system and how it's working. We're going to talk a little bit about the autonomic nervous system in general. And then we're going to talk about establishing baseline and tracking the data, what the data means, what's it mean for you in terms of training and recovery. And we're going to talk a little bit about stress management, HRV and stress management. And then we're going to talk about, can this number be improved? Because there's a lot of discussion about whether HRV can actually be improved or not. And we'll dive into that discussion as well. So anyway, that's what we're talking about today. And before we dive in, as always, if you're watching this video on YouTube, please hit the like button. Also, please subscribe to the channel. It kind of helps us with the algorithms and really helps us grow the message that we're trying to reach people with. And hopefully you'll find value and hit that like button. You can also visit our website at www.synergycoaching.com, or you can contact us directly at gcopeland@synergycoaching.com right here. So the first thing we want to discuss is what is heart rate variability? What is HRV? So to put it simply, as your heart beats, okay, and most of the time when you measure your HRV, it's going to come from, a device like the Whoop, or, even your Garmin can track it. There's a lot of devices that actually are tracking HRV right now. But what is HRV? What's that variability and what's that mean? So as you're resting, okay, or really at any point in time, but most of the time the measurement's taken when you're resting. The heart beats, there's a time gap between that beat and the next beat. So I'm going to make the numbers really simple. So let's just say that there's a quarter of a second between the first beat and the second beat. Okay, then between the second beat and the third beat, let's just say there's an eighth of a second variability, okay, or eighth of a second. So the difference between the heartbeat between heartbeat 1 and 2 and heartbeat 2 and 3, that variability is what the heart rate variability is. So we measure that, and there's a reason why we measure that. And the basic reason is because as that number grows, as there's more variability within the heart rate, the more at rest you are, okay, or the more recovered you are, or the less stressed out you are, okay. So HRV traditionally has been used by athletes, and it's a measurement to help decide how recovered they are, so that they know exactly how hard they can train, today. So I use the Whoop for almost all of my data, and I get a straight HRV number with my Whoop every day. And based upon the information that Whoop gathers, within heart rate variability being one of the biggest things, I know how hard I can train. It gives me some guidelines on how hard I can train for that day. So that is one of the main reasons why athletes in particular have used heart rate variability. But you're seeing a lot more measurement of HRV in terms of how how is your autonomic nervous system working? And we talked at length about the autonomic nervous system in the Introduction to Meditation podcast that I did, I guess probably a month ago. But at any rate, we talked a lot about the sympathetic and the parasympathetic nervous system and how those kind of are always working at odds with each other. And what happens is we wind up getting stuck oftentimes in that sympathetic phase of the autonomic nervous system. And basically what that means is that we're chronically stressed. And we don't want that, okay? And if we utilize heart rate variability as a tool to measure that, we can begin to see if we're making progress with our stress reduction. So we'll talk a little bit more about that as we go on. But that's a big part of why we want to measure HRV, why we want to track our HRV. There's tremendous value in tracking this data and understanding what this data is about. Okay, so let's dive in just a little bit more, and as we're talking about tracking this number, how do we go about tracking it? First of all, I mentioned just a few minutes ago or a few seconds ago that, I track it on the Whoop. Okay, a lot of people use Garmin, or I think Apple Watch probably you can track an HRV number. Sometimes they'll take the HRV and they'll roll it into a formulation that they have, and they'll just give you a stress number, like what's your daily stress number, and it kind of measures a lot of different things. It's really good to be able to look at what your specific HRV number is, because that HRV number really does give the data that you need to understand, number one, like we talked about, recovery, and we're going to dive into that in just a minute, and also what's our autonomic nervous system health look like overall. So the first thing we want to do as we track this data, we want to establish a baseline. Okay, so like the first 2 weeks of measurement that you have in your HRV number, it fluctuates daily. Okay, so it takes a little bit of time to gather enough data to establish a baseline. That way you'll know where your norm is, and then you'll know if you're below that norm or whether you're above that norm. And it kind of helps give you the proper data and information that you need, regardless of what you're utilizing the HRV data for. Okay, like I said, most athletes use it for recovery. We're going to talk about that right now. So when we talk about the recovery number, if I go out and I gut myself on, an 80-mile bike ride with, 8,000 feet of climbing, okay, I'll wake up tomorrow and my HRV number is going to be really, really low, because I have completely stressed my body to a point to where there's just not going to be much variability between those heartbeats. So what that tells me is that I need to rest and I need to relax and recover. So that's when athletes are using that number, that's what they gauge. Now athletes get stressed out too. So like they're just overall stressed, if they don't sleep well, or if they're really uptight about an upcoming event, or if you're an athlete like the vast majority of us that actually work and have lives and family and other stressors in our life, those all feed into that heart rate variability number too. So sleep deprivation, stress levels along with activity can lower your HRV and also impact your recovery. So you want to keep that in mind. When we talk about HRV in terms of stress management, it's important to understand how the sympathetic and the parasympathetic work, and they work counter to each other. And we talked about this at length in in the Intro to Meditation podcast that I did with the Warrior in the Garden podcast not too long ago. You can look that up, or maybe I'll link it for you here. I'll definitely link it in the message below. But at any rate, as we exist, you've got, this is going to be sympathetic. This is the proverbial fight or flight. And when we're stressed out, this goes up, okay? And basically what happens when this goes up, it raises cortisol levels, and it creates, when those cortisol levels are continually raised, it creates a lot of disease and metabolic malfunctions within our body. Just the high blood pressure, cardiovascular disease. It raises blood sugar. If the blood sugar remains constantly raised, it can drive insulin resistance. It can cause you to gain weight, because as insulin resistance goes up, the body starts storing fat, and it doesn't store fat in a positive way. It stores fat in terms of visceral fat, which is the most unhealthy fat that you can have, which is the fat that kind of exists around the organs and so forth. So, it impacts immune response, sex drive. It can even lead to gluconeogenesis, which is basically muscle atrophy. So you don't want to stay in that zone, and yet, unfortunately, Americans stay in that high sympathetic nervous system state, the fight or flight state, far too long, far too often. And a lot of times what happens is, chronic stress is an adaptation. So we get stuck there, and we have to be able to lower that. And we'll talk a little bit about how to get out of that and break that cycle. But so if we're managing our stress levels, people use blood pressure, which is certainly an adequate measure. They use a couple of different things, but this HRV number, and if we track that baseline over time, and if we can see that HRV number is rising, that's a pretty good indicator that we're starting to break that cycle of chronic stress adaptation. So just that's another reason why this number is so important to track, and it's a number that most people aren't even overly aware of, and that's why I want to bring this to your attention. So finally, we've talked a little bit about what the HRV number is, how we utilize it in training, how we utilize it in terms of a stress management protocol, and how we want to break that the cycle of stress that most Americans live in. And then we talk about, can the HRV number be improved? And I think that we've already determined that it can, by breaking that cycle. And even for athletes, you can improve that number, in terms of being able to manage the stress of your workouts, the stress of your training. And as our body becomes more adapted to training, we manage that heart rate. The heart rate variability is going to increase because the body's more efficient, and it's able to manage that better. And so as our body becomes more efficient, which is one of the 5 pillars, and when we talk about it, actually all 5 of the pillars will improve, and I'm going to pop this up right here. These are the 5 pillars of longevity. With each of these, it can help improve your HRV. Certainly daily exercise is going to help that, because exercise lowers stress levels. And then as we begin to put an intentional stressor on the system, then we can begin to manage that stress and kind of raise our body's ability to adapt to stress. So that's one reason why constant exercise and having a proper exercise routine is so important. When we talk about, pillar 2, which is proper diet, and how does it impact the HRV number, mostly that's going to come from your metabolic health. All right, if we're metabolically broken and we're not eating properly, our body naturally goes into a more stressful state. Our body's just having to work harder, to just manage the sludge that we're putting into our body. and we're not managing that well. We don't have proper nutrient supply, and our energy sourcing is horrible. So, obviously proper diet can certainly impact that number as well, just from the stress that an improper diet can bring about, and especially if it impacts our metabolic health significantly. We talked briefly before about efficient body. Obviously, the more efficient our body is, the less impact and the less amount of energy and stress it's going to take for the body to complete daily functions. So the efficient body is certainly crucial. And stress reduction, so we're going to dive into that just a little bit more here in a minute, but that's absolutely key to managing our HRV and being able to raise that number and show some improvement in that. And then pillar 5, that's kind of an intangible, and pillar 5 is the one pillar that most people, especially the people that are watching this, because this channel tends to be so based in science, there's not as much science tied to chi, and there's not as much science that's tied to pillar 5 yet. It's coming. I see more and more all the time. But the whole idea behind this one is having this long, open, energetic body. And obviously, the more open and the more freely our energetic body moves, the less stress there's going to be. So that just goes to show how all 5 of the pillars can work to impact that HRV number. But I want to hone in on just a couple of the pillars specifically. Number 1 is the power of exercise. We've discussed at length, and we talk all the time about the power of exercise and the impacts that having a proper exercise protocol has on the body in terms of all-cause mortalities. But it certainly, when we wrap all this around with our discussion today on HRV, it's certainly probably the number 1 thing to take on. So if we prioritize, and I don't prioritize the 5 pillars because they all work together. And in an ideal plan, which you can learn to put together in our Synergy Academy, they interact with each other. Okay, so managing each one of these and practicing each of the 5 pillars is a lot more beneficial than just picking one thing to work on. But if you're going to pick one thing to work on and start with, I always tell people to get your exercise house in order. Before you do anything else, get your exercise house in order. Because if you're increasing your muscle mass, if you're improving your strength, if you're improving your functional strength, you're just going to make your life better. If you are exercising on a regular basis and you have a proper exercise protocol that includes the zone 2, high intensity interval training, HIIT type classes, VO2 max type workouts, you're going to reduce your stress. It's just, that's the way the body works. Physiologically, you're going to fix yourself in terms of doing that. So, but it's not always easy, especially the VO2 max workouts. They're not fun, they hurt, but it's the number 1 exercise you can do for longevity. So anyway, so that's the power of exercise. I would tell you first and foremost, if you're only going to add one protocol, add the exercise. Put yourself on a good exercise program first of all. And you'll find that that's going to improve your HRV pretty significantly as you go. The next thing is, let's talk a little bit about recovery from exertion first. Okay, so Lori and I have so many friends that cycle, and we're cyclists and endurance athletes, and the people we ride with don't always they don't always have the greatest plan for the way they go about their work. and they'll plan an event, and they'll go balls to the wall trying to train and get ready for this event. And what they don't understand is they don't mix recovery into the protocol whatsoever. So they think, and it's kind of an American thing, when I was a triathlete, I was never very good at triathlon until I understood the value of recovery. Once I understood the value of recovery, my performance increased dramatically. So it's the one thing that is the hardest for people to understand, that if you take recovery days, you will get better faster because the body needs to recover. But it's so ingrained into our culture, no pain, no gain, and that type of mentality of no pain, no gain. And that's simply not true, especially with endurance athletes. It's not true with any type of athletic endeavor, but it's especially true in endurance athletics. So recovery from exertion, and the way to measure that is through the HRV. Like when I look at I listen to my whoop data, it tells me what I'm capable of every day. So if I've got a hard training ride, and I live in the mountains of East Tennessee, so if I've got a hard training day on the bike scheduled, and I wake up and my recovery shows that I'm either in the low yellow, or especially if I'm in the red, which means that my HRV is down into the low 30s, I'm not going to be able to adequately train that training day that I have scheduled. It is much smarter for me to adjust that program and get proper work. And most of the time that's a recovery ride. And then I can just shift my hard day to another day. So when we look at that and when we track the HRV number, that data is correct, because I've tried. When I first started using the whoop, I would wake up and I would feel good, and I would feel like I could go out and I could do a hard ride, but my whoop would be telling me that I don't have it. Like my recovery number is not where it should be, and I'll go out and try, and I would go out and try and ride that ride, and it was never good. I mean, I was never strong on the bike those days, and that information is real, and you should listen to it. So that's what we're talking about with exercise, and then recovery from exercise, which is as important as the hard days. Your recovery days are as important, if not more important, than your hard days. So let's talk about, we're going to talk about pillar 4, which is stress reduction, meditation, and qigong practice. And we talked about this a lot. Like that whole intro to meditation podcast that I did a couple of weeks ago for Warrior in a Garden was about the impact that it has on stress. So, and how much it benefits reducing stress. So when we talked about the parasympathetic and sympathetic, if you're a stress adaptive and you're stuck in that stress related, fight or flight zone all the time, meditation helps break that. Qigong work helps break that. And it because it's a seesaw. As we talked about in that, if you watch that video, you'll see it's a seesaw. As the parasympathetic rises and becomes more prevalent, the sympathetic goes down. Okay, so your stress level goes down, and you absolutely have to break that cycle. So meditation, qigong, and stress reduction matters, and can actually help improve your HRV number. That's one of the best ways to improve, other than exercise, to improve that HRV number. So even with the cyclists that I work with and athletes that I work with, I put them on meditation practice. I mean, it's important. It's important for everybody to take time to just sit still and just breathe, or do some sort of a qigong workout to where, breath work and mindfulness is an important part of what you do. You should do that daily. So anyway, that's a great way to help improve that HRV number, and it certainly can be improved. So in closing, I want to give kind of a quick recap. Obviously not a real long discussion today. HRV is a really important topic. And your ability to manage HRV and to pay attention to what that number is telling you. And it's a number that I highly encourage everyone to track. All of my clients track HRV. Okay, like if you work with me personally, we're tracking your HRV. If you're going through the Synergy Academy, I'm showing you how to track your HRV, and that number means a lot, as we've just talked about in this discussion, and everything that means, and the ability to understand, is it a recovery day? Am I managing my stress well? Those are all of the important aspects of what we do. So anyway, so HRV is really critical. I encourage everybody to either get a Garmin or get some method of tracking so that you can measure your HRV on a daily basis, not just your stress level and not just your recovery level. I know Lori's got a Garmin, and she works off of her body battery, and she doesn't get her HRV number daily. I would get one like the Whoop. The Whoop strap's just phenomenal. I think the Oura ring actually measures and gives you a specific HRV number. But looking at that HRV number on a daily basis is really important. So anyway, thanks for taking the time today to listen to this video. Again, take a moment and visit our webpage at www.synergycoaching.com. Reach out to us if you have any questions at all. If you email me, I'll certainly respond. My goal is always to respond within 24 hours to any emails I get. You can do that through the web page. Is probably the best way to do it. And then always remember one thing, okay? And this is what I tell everybody that listen to the videos, the people that come on board with Synergy Academy, or that are taking Tai Chi classes online, or any other thing that we do. Remember that it's not where you have been on your wellness journey. It's not where you are today, okay, but rather where you want to be and where you want to be tomorrow, and where you can be tomorrow by giving your body proper inputs. The human body is a remarkable thing, and the better you take care of your body, the better it treats you. So anyway, so we're all about wellness and longevity, and like I said, just take a moment, visit the webpage, and good luck on your journey, and have a great day.